Hey guys, so I'm gonna do things a little bit differently now that the end of May is coming and I've got to start doing a lot more paperwork and stuff at home. So instead of doing 3 videos a day, I'm gonna bring it down to just 1 video a day, and I'm gonna try to finish the Funny Frank book here, okay? So I'm sorry, y'all were probably looking forward to some of the activities some other activities y'all could do at home, but I just really don't have the time to do that anymore, okay guys, and I apologize for that. Anyways, let's go ahead and read the next chapter of Funny Frank by Dick King Smith, illustrated by John Eastwood. We're on chapter 7. One of Jemima's jobs about the farm was to shut up the hens and the ducks in their respective houses in the evening to keep them safe from foxes. She left her mother working on the artificial webbed feet and went out into the orchard. So there's Jemima there walking out into the orchard. Sleepy murmurs from the hen house told her that the flock had already gone into bed, and automatically she bent to close the pop hole when she thought, "Oh, Frank! Is he inside?" She opened the door of the hen house. He wasn't. She went into the duck house outside, which several ducks and the big white drake were still pottering about, preening and gabbling softly to one another. Jemima hushed them into the house and looked inside to see all the ducks and the ducklings, but no Frank. Quickly she shut up the duck house door and ran to the duck pond. There, still floating happily out in the middle, was Frank. When the ducks had begun to leave the pond and waddle away toward the duck house, Frank had been in no hurry to follow. He had become rather hot wearing as he was in a rubber suit over his plumage, and now floating on the nice cold water as the heat went out of the day and the sun sank. Was so refreshing. "You coming, chick?" the ducklings called out as they swam past following their mother. "It's time for Betty Buys." "I think I'll stay here for a bit," Frank replied. "I'm enjoying it." So there's Jemima gathering up the ducks, and there's Frank floating in the water there. "Wicked man," they said. "Let's hope that someone else doesn't enjoy you." "Who?" asked Frank. "Mr. Fox," cried the ducklings, and they scuttered off. For a while Frank continued to float about on the pond, trying to decide what to do. "Surely I'll be safe out in the middle here," he thought. "Foxes can't swim." Can they? Just then he heard his name called. "Frank!" called Jemima. "Come off the pond, you silly boy." When he made no move, she found a long stick and waded in till the water was near the tops of her wellies, then reached out and managed to hook Frank with the stick and pull him to shore. Jemima picked him up and carried him to the hen house, and when she went to open the door, he kicked and struggled and squawked and shouted "Frank!" in an angry voice. So she took him to the duck house. As soon as she opened its door, he jumped out of her arms and rushed in. When she had closed the door, Jemima listened for a moment. Inside, the ducks were gabbling quietly, and the ducklings peeping in a show of welcome, she thought. So there's the ducks here, and there's Jemima calling out to Frank, and there she is picking him up with the stick to get him out of the pond. In reply, her young cockerel said his name several times. Strange, Jemima thought. It's beginning to sound more like Quack than Frank. "What do you think of these then, Tom?" said Carrie Tabb to her husband, holding out holding out the results of her handiwork. The farmer picked one up and inspected it. "By golly, that's a duck's foot and a half," he said. "Grand pair of flippers they'll make." "More like galoshes, really," said Jemima's mother. "Don't forget that Frank has to be able to walk in them as well as swim in them." When are you going to fit them on him?" "Tomorrow morning. Jemima can catch Frank when she lets the hens out." "No, she can't," said Jemima, coming in. "He wouldn't go to bed with the hens. He's in the duck house. Anyway, why must I catch him?" Her mother and father pointed, one with pride, one with amusement, at the strange pair of artificial webbed feet, bright yellow with 5 stiffened claws, which had been 4 fingers and 4 fingers and a thumb. Inside each rubber glove, a piece of stout plastic had been cut out to the shape of a duck's foot. So there's the webbed feet that they made, and they're showing Jemima the webbed feet. "Oh, Mom, you are clever," Jemima said. "I can't wait to see if they work properly." Wait till I finish tomorrow morning's milking," said her father. "This is something I don't want to miss." When the next day the farmer came into the orchard, his wife and daughter were ready and waiting. They had fitted the new feet to Frank and taped the cuffs of the gloves securely around each leg. He was quite a sight, with his brown head and wings and tail poking out of his green hot water bottle sweatsuit and his yellow rubber glove webs. Jemima put the young cockerel down on the grass. For a moment Frank stood still, puzzled by the strange things that had been put on his feet. Then he began to walk, lifting each foot high, then putting it down again flat on the ground. Rather like a man in snowshoes. He tripped himself once or twice due to the size of his new webs, but then he got more used to them and began to make his way toward the duck pond. He splashed in the shallows and walked on in until he was floating. Jemima held her mother's hand tightly. "Oh, Mom, will it work? It will work, won't it?" she said. So there's Jemima there. And there's Frank walking around in his new webbed feet. Do you think it's going to work? Let's see. "Fingers crossed," said her mother. And they all 3 crossed them. Then, as they watched, Frank began to make strong thrusts with his long legs, just as the movements he would have made to run on dry land. And immediately he began to move forward, slowly at first, then faster, till he was swimming around the pond at a speed no duck could hope to match. In fact, all the other ducks got hastily out of the way, lest they be rammed by the speeding waterbird. "Wicked!" the ducklings cried as they whizzed by. "Cool, man, cool!" Farmer Tab summed up the general amazement. "Love a duck," he said. And there he is swimming around with the ducks. And that's the end of chapter 7. So we'll have to check out chapter 8 tomorrow, huh? Anyways, I hope y'all are all doing so well. I send all my love to y'all guys. And remember the class rules. Love yourself, love others. Bye.